In today's video, I'm going to be talking about demoing and reviewing a ton of new products that I just haven't had a chance to talk about on my channel yet. Some of these are older, like a few months old, and I just didn't get them at the time of release, but have gotten them more recently and have been trying them out for quite some time now. Some are a little bit newer, but all of these I've used several times, and so I feel like I have a pretty good handle on these products. And so I just wanted to take the time now to talk about them, share my thoughts on them, share some demos. The products I'm going to be featuring today are the No. 1 de Chanel foundation. I have two of the new shades of the Charlotte Tilbury Eyes to Mesmerize. I'm going to be swatching both of those and using one of them on my eyes as a base. And then I'm going to do my full eye look with one of the Dior Velvet palettes. This one is the shade 869 Red Tartan. I also have the new Benefit brow pencil. This is called the Gimme Brow Volumizing pencil, so I'm going to be demoing that and sharing my thoughts on it as well. I have the new Tower 28 mascara. I have one of the RMS ReDimension blushes, and I also have the Sonia G Jumbo Bronzer brush. So if you'd like to see all of that, just keep on watching. Right off the bat, I'm going to let you know that the lighting is going to be a bit inconsistent today. I pre-filmed all of the demos, and as time went on, it got much darker out. It's raining really hard right now, so it's quite dark out. So I do have a little ring light on right now just so you can see everything better. And so about halfway through the demos, I had to turn the ring light on. I'm still in natural light, but I really needed the help from the ring light. So just to let you know, if you're seeing some shifting in the lighting, that's what's going on. So I started out today with the No. 1 de Chanel foundation. I have this in the shade BD01, which is the lightest shade in the range, and it's also a golden undertone shade. I find this to be a really excellent shade for me, actually. It's a little bit too dark for me when I have super pale skin, but I find it's good for right now in the fall. But I know that as we get into the cooler months, it's going to be just a touch too dark for me, but it's still a really nice fair shade. The golden undertone is very nice on this. I don't find it to be too warm or too yellowy. It actually reads to me more like a neutral shade, and it works nicely to kind of cancel out a little bit of the redness that I have on my face. The finish of this foundation is beautiful. To a degree, I find that it can kind of just take on the finish of whatever you have going on underneath it. But I think overall, it's most helpful to just think of this as a natural skin finish foundation. I don't find it to be particularly glowy. I don't find it to be particularly matte. And it's going to depend, of course, on the concealer you pair it with, if you're pairing it with the concealer, as well as the powder that you use. But in its most basic sense, I feel this has a natural skin finish. It has a slight blurring property to it, and I prefer to just use one pump of this, and I find with that I can get a quite natural look. Light medium to medium coverage. I find it applies very well with either a brush or a sponge. I don't particularly have a preference for that. If I want a little bit more coverage, a brush is the way to go, and that's what I did today, but it applies beautifully with a sponge as well. So I feel like this is just a foundation that is going to work really well across the board. I think it's going to work really well for lots of different skin types. I find it to be very customizable in the coverage. You can build it up if you want to. You can apply it a little bit more sheerly. The finish I find to be a little bit adjustable too, and it just plays really nicely with other products. I find it wears beautifully throughout the day. I do start to see a little bit of wearing down, probably around the 5-6 hour mark, but not to a degree where I feel like I need touch-ups with it. It wears elegantly, and although it does fade a little bit, it fades in a way that isn't going to be too noticeable. It's still going to look really natural on the skin. Today for concealer, I used my Hourglass Vanish concealer, and then I used the Gucci powder. I didn't show myself applying the concealer, but I did film myself using the powder just because I wanted you to be able to see kind of how the powder interacts with the finish of the foundation and the concealer as well. It definitely mattified a little bit. This Gucci powder I've been using a lot lately because it has quite a soft focus finish. I feel like it's not a drying powder. but it will set down and blur a little bit, but it's not going to look too cakey. It almost has a slightly kind of balmy, creamy quality to it, which is one of the reasons that I really like it. And I think that it works well with the Chanel foundation for those reasons as well. The next products I want to talk about are the new Charlotte Tilbury Eyes to Mesmerize. I have the shades Exaggereyes and Sunlit Glow. I had no intention of getting these at all. I was recently watching one of Jenna Fraze's favorites videos and she featured these there, and they just looked stunning. She spoke very highly of them, and she gave a couple of tips for wearing these Charlotte Tilbury shadows in that video that really prompted me to get these. I have several shades of the Eyes to Mesmerize, and I've just never been fully satisfied with them, but I think the reason for that is because I didn't quite know how to work with them in the most optimal way. So I feel like I was always trying to do more with these shadows than I really should have been, and I was trying to build them up more than I should have been as well. Another issue that I've had more recently with these shadows is creasing. I didn't used to get that, but more in the last kind of 4 or 5 months or so, every time that I tried these, I found that I would get some creasing. So Jenna's tips really helped me out. The first was to avoid creasing, use a primer. I don't have a specific eye primer, but I've been using the NARS Soft Matte Concealer just on my lids. Just a thin layer of that blended out all over my lid. Underneath these Eyes to Mesmerize works perfectly, and I haven't had a hint of creasing since I've started using that method. And I've also found that it really helps the shadows to wear beautifully all day long, because that was another issue with these, was that they would kind of fade as the day went on if I applied them to bare lids or if I applied them just over more of a liquidy kind of concealer. So I think a primer or a really kind of matte concealer as a base really helps these shadows out. And then her other tip was actually in the method of applying them. So she said the best way to apply them is to just go in with your finger, take up a little bit of the product, pat it on the lid. You can kind of start to blend it out a little bit, but then you want to go in with a little bit of a fluffier blending brush just to kind of spread it around the rest of the lid and diffuse the edges. And I found that works perfectly. My favorite brush to use for these is the KJH Spectrum number 11 brush. It's a little bit fluffy, but not too big, so it's good for my smaller eyes. And it allows me to have enough control but still have that kind of fluffiness to diffuse things out really easily. And it's a fully synthetic brush, so I don't mind using it with cream products. On the lower lash line, if I'm putting these on my lower lash line, I don't bother with any primer under there, but I use the KJH Spectrum number 18 brush most of the time for that, and just dip right into the pot and spread it out on my lower lash line, and that works really nicely as well. The shade Sunlit Glow is really gorgeous. It's this duochrome gold to pink shade, and this is really fun to wear. The shade of this is actually very similar to one of the shades in the Natasha Denona My Dream palette, so that's obviously a powder in her palette, but it has the same kind of pink to gold shift, and I've actually layered these on top of one another before, and that created a really beautiful dimensional look. But today I used Exaggereyes. This is a beautiful shade for every day. I like this for kind of a no makeup type look. It's not really going to give you a no makeup look because it's much too shimmery for that. It's very obvious that you actually have some kind of a texture on your lids, but the color of it is really easily wearable. I would say overall it pulls as a warmer tone. It's not too warm, so it doesn't look orangey or too peachy or too golden or anything, but it is a little bit of a warmer, kind of almost like a caramel type tone. And that's really the base of it. But the shimmery reflective quality of this is really quite noticeable, which is one of the reasons that I like it. I think some of the Eyes to Mesmerize shades don't have as much of that reflect. This one has quite a lot of it. And I feel like the shimmery particles in this are actually a slightly cooler tone. So that also helps to balance out the warmth of the base, but I do still feel like the overall effect is a little bit of a warmth from this one. So today I used that as my base. I didn't actually apply the NARS concealer as a primer under this because I was just using this as a base for a powder eyeshadow look to go on top, but I wanted to show you at least how the shade looks in a very, very thin layer. Normally, if I were just using this Exaggereyes cream as my only lid color, I wouldn't sheer it out as much as I did on the actual lid part. Then I went in with this Dior palette. So Dior brought out these velvet quints a couple months ago now, I think, and I just wasn't all that interested in them. I couldn't really decide on a color story that I wanted, so I passed on them. But more recently, I really found myself craving a good red eyeshadow palette. I find that most red eyeshadows end up actually looking more pink than red. They don't look like true reds on my eyes. So I was really looking for something that I would be able to get a truly red looking look. To me, that's a bit of a warmer red. More of an orangey red is required for me to get that type of look because other reds just turn pink on me. So I ultimately ended up getting this red tartan palette, and I think it does exactly what I wanted it to do. This shade right here is the one that really makes this palette what I want it to be, more of a true red, because although yes, it's very orangey when you look at it in the pan, when I put this on my eyes, it gives me the red that I need. The red in the middle, I think, is more capable of pulling into the kind of pinky category. I actually didn't use this shade at all today because I didn't want any of that kind of deep pink hint in my look at all. But these three shades here all work together beautifully, and they don't pull too pink if you want to get a red eye look. If you wanted something a little bit more subtle, you could focus on these ones and even this one. These three together are not going to pull red. They're going to give you more of a kind of rosy look, and I really love this rosy shade as well. That was really the other draw to this palette. Although this is a velvet palette, so most of these shades are more matte, this one is a little bit of a shimmer. To me, it's more shimmery than a satin, but less shimmery and reflective than a typical metallic. So it gives a beautiful soft sheen, and I love that rosy tone. I decided to go a little bit out of my comfort zone with this eye look and do a bit of a halo eye. And although I did focus that satiny shimmer on the center, I wanted a little bit more reflect. So I went into my Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction and used that kind of rosy beigey pink to really amplify the shimmer in the center of my lid. I think this Dior palette is excellent quality. Reds can be really tricky, as I mentioned, both in getting the color right, but also in getting the formula right in a way that's not going to be patchy and that is going to blend really nicely. I have zero issues with the blending of these shades. They apply really beautifully. They're quite pigmented, so I find that starting with a lighter hand and building up as I go along is the best approach for me. And I'm just so pleased that this palette is exactly what I wanted it to be. It does exactly what I wanted it to do. And although it's not something that I would be wearing on an everyday basis probably, it's great to know that I have this to go to when I want to do a more red eye look. I finished today's eye look off with a little bit of my Victoria Beckham Cocoa liner on my upper lash line and upper waterline. And then I went in with the Victoria Beckham brightening eye kajal on my lower waterline. I find that especially with a red eye look, it can be really helpful to have that brightening color on the lower lash line. It stopped raining and I just turned my ring light out, so we're back in completely natural light. I don't think it's made too much of a difference. The next thing I went in with was the new Tower 28 mascara. This is the Make Waves mascara, and it's in the shade Jet, which is currently the only shade that they have. I find this to be an excellent mascara. I saw all the hype about it and I thought I'd give it a try. I've been wanting to try a new mascara, and so I decided I would try this one. This gives such an immediate impact. The color is a super dark black, which I think helps with that impact, but it's also the formula and the wand. The formula just grips onto the lashes so quickly and easily. I just did one coat with this and I didn't feel like I needed to build it up at all. Often when I have a more intense eye look, I like to really build up the mascara so it kind of balances it out, but I just didn't need to do that with this mascara. The wand is excellent because it has this curved shape, so I find it really easy to apply. It's not too fat either, which a wider, fluffier mascara wand can present issues for me with my more hooded eyes and my smaller eyes. It can get messy very quickly with that type of wand or a brush, but this one is thin enough. It's not too thin though. It's not too flexible. The mascara that I've been using the most recently before I got this one was the Maybelline Sky High mascara, and I like that one, but I find there's just no contest between that one and this one. That one has a flimsier wand, which is not really an issue, but it makes me feel like the mascara isn't like quite grabbing on and getting stuck onto my lashes as much as I want it to with that kind of flimsier, more flexible wand. And I also find that that one really does require at least 2 coats to be built up to have the impact that I want from it. whereas this one is just immediate. The other benefit of the wand is that shape. So I like to go on with the concave side first and coat most of my lashes, but then I can flip it over and use the convex side to get a more targeted application. It helps me to get into the inner corner and also to just build up if there are certain spots where I want to build up the product a little bit more. Using that convex side makes it a lot easier to do that. I haven't had any issues with smudging or flaking with this mascara. In fact, I find it wears perfectly throughout the day. It does take a little bit of extra work to get off with my cleansing balm. Just have to spend a little bit more time making sure I've removed it all because it really does latch onto the lashes. Next, I went in with bronzer and I used this one size bronzing palette today. I started out with a smaller brush to get a little bit of a contour effect, so I used one of the deeper shades in the palette and the Sonia G Detail Pro for that. But the main thing I really wanted to demonstrate was the jumbo bronzer from Sonia G. So I went into the lightest shade in the palette with this because I wanted to use that shade to do more of an overall bronzing effect. I wanted to cover a larger area with that, and this brush is perfect for that. When I saw that this was being released, I just felt really drawn to it. Part of the reason is that I love Sonia G brushes in general, but I especially love the dyed goat hair brushes, so I knew that I would like the texture. I just find these to be the perfect combination of super soft, but still with a really good ability to pick up product and a little bit more sturdiness than something like a squirrel hair brush. So I find this to be my perfect happy medium type of bristle. This is just so luxurious in the length of the bristles. I think Sonia G said this is the longest bristle brush that she has at this point. Beautifully densely packed. It's much more densely packed than something like the Soft Cheek, which is my favorite blush brush, but also in the dyed goat hair. So this is able to pick up a really good amount of product, but it has the flexibility and the length of those bristles that makes it very easy to blend them out and very flexible in terms of the motion that you want to use. I tend not to usually go for like a stamping motion when I'm using brushes. It's just not the natural thing for me to do, but this works beautifully for stamping, and it somehow diffuses the product while stamping it in so that you don't even really need to blend very much. If you wanted to add a little bit more pigment to a certain area, you can just kind of stamp it on, and I find that it just diffuses itself naturally, but it also works beautifully for more of that kind of swirling motion. It works with a swiping motion. You can also do kind of smaller buffing swirls with this as well. It's just beautiful. And because of the shape of the brush, you can also do a slightly more targeted application. It is, I think, going to be best for doing large areas, but you can also just take a little bit of product on the end of the brush or on the edges and get a little bit more of a targeted application that way. After bronzer, I went in with one of the RMS ReDimension blushes. These are super hyped. Everyone I've seen talk about these just loves them. And I've always been drawn to them as well because of how they look in the pan. I love baked gelée products, and I loved the radiance that I could see in these. I went for the shade French Rosé. I actually ordered this from Beautylish at the same time that I got the bronzer brush. These have been out of stock on Sephora Canada for quite some time, at least in the shades that I was interested in. So I was quite excited to see this available on Beautylish and decided I'd give it a try. And this shade is really stunning. I love how it's clearly a pink. I find it to be a little bit of a warmer pink, but it doesn't pull peachy or orangey as sometimes warmer pink tones can. It's just this beautiful fresh pink. I think it's described as a cool tone, and maybe that's why it doesn't pull too warm on me. It's just a perfect, really fresh pink, but it's also not too cool. It's not something like the Dior Pink Glow blush, which I love as well, but it's a very cool tone. This is just a beautiful, vibrant, but still somehow natural pink. The finish of these blushes is incredible. They're very pigmented, so I like to go in with a lighter hand, but they blend so beautifully that even if you pick up a little bit too much product, it's not really an issue to get it blended out and looking more natural. And I'm in love with the sheen that these give. I don't find they look metallic on the skin, but they have an obvious sheen. I don't see any glitter particles at all, and I don't find that it emphasizes any texture on my cheeks. I don't deal with a ton of texture on my cheek area, so for those who do, this may emphasize a bit of texture, but for me, I don't notice it doing that at all. And I think the shade French Rosé specifically is perfect for really livening up the skin, bringing a look back to life and just adding that kind of youthful pink glow to the cheeks. I forgot to talk about the Benefit Gimme Brow Volumizing Pencil, so I'll do that right now. Since I got this, I haven't used another brow pencil or brow gel. I often use my clear Benefit brow gel with this, but that's the only other brow product I've been using since I got this. This is just, for some reason, so easy to use. It's less waxy than most of the other brow pencils that I've used. So my go-to brow pencil before this was another Benefit one. It was the Goof Proof. I like that it has a bigger tip. I don't tend to like to be too precise with my brows. I'm really just looking to fill in certain areas and maybe extend the tail a tiny little bit. But my main goal with my brow pencil is not really to draw in individual hairs. It's more to just kind of fill in the color. And this just works so well for that. As I said, it's less waxy than the other Benefit brow pencils, and I feel like that just makes it a little bit easier to apply. And to me, it gives the perfect fluffy, full and natural brow look that I love. This color also seems to be the most perfect shade I could ask for. This is the shade 2, which is one of the blonde shades. I can't remember how they describe the undertone, but that's what it looks like. I like to use more blonde brow products generally because my brows are a little bit thicker. I feel like they always look a little bit less full and less dark on camera than they are in real life. I also have a bit of a lower brow in general, so I don't like to go too heavy with my brows, but I like to keep the fullness. So using a lighter brow product just tends to give me more of the effect that I want, and I've never found anything that gives me the effect that I want so easily and so quickly as this pencil. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about this new Dior lipstick. This is one of their transfer-proof, forever, long-lasting lipsticks. I got it in the shade 100 Forever Nude Look. Nude Look is a classic shade from Dior, and I've actually never tried that shade before, but I was so curious about this formula, and I've been curious about that shade for quite some time. So that's why I chose this one. I think it's a beautiful nude pink shade. Let's see if it's actually transfer proof. I've had it on for probably about 20-30 minutes now. There's a tiny little bit of it that transferred there, but barely anything. It feels very secure on my lips, and it does feel a little bit dry, but this formula is very thin, so it doesn't feel like heavy and dry. It's just a little bit dry. I tend to spend most of my day just wearing lip balms or really moisturizing lip glosses, so I can definitely tell that this is not that, but it feels very comfortable, very lightweight. It doesn't feel like it's actually drying my lips out, and I love the finish of it. I prefer the look of a matte finish on my lips, and this gives a beautiful soft matte finish and a lightweight look to it as well. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful if you've been interested in any of these products. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. I always love to see those, and if you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thanks again so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.